Hey everybody, it's Kent C. Dodds here, joined by my friend Annie Sexton. Hi, how are you doing, Annie?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. Thanks.
I'm so happy to have you here. I'm super excited to chat with you about product engineering and the durable skills that people can develop in the current world that we live in, and hopefully durable skills that are durable enough to go on even as AI agents kind of eat the traditional software coder kind of work that we've done. So before we get into our chat, Annie, why don't we get to know you a little bit? What is it that you do? What are you excited about? And yeah, why do you care about building excellent experiences for users?
So, like Ken said, my name is Annie. I am a developer educator. I currently work at ngrok, and my specialty is sort of to do educational, technical videos about all sorts of things. And this has been a subject or a field that I've been very passionate about for a very long time as somebody who is completely self-taught. I always felt ill-equipped to navigate this world of software development. And so finally being able to be in a position where I can teach all the things that I've learned so that other people don't feel as lost is really meaningful for me. So that's why I love doing what I'm doing.
I love that. As an educator myself, I relate very much to that idea. I just think there's something really special about education where I think of it as similar to a fire where well, let's say M&Ms. If I have a handful of M&Ms and I give you some, now I have less, and that's like not great. I mean, I feel good because I'm now you have some, and that makes me feel good. But a fire, like I've got a torch with a fire, and I can light your torch, and now
Mm-hmm.
my fire's not diminished. Your fire is lit, and so now everybody has, and then you can pass it on to other people, like, and the whole area is lighter. I really love that about education.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
So, with your work over at ngrok, being a like general purpose educator, just teaching about whatever it is that you want to teach about over there. How do you identify who your customers are, or who your users, or like your students? How do you find them, and how do you know what they need, and solve the pain points that maybe they don't even know they have?
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel a little ill-equipped to answer this now, given that upon recording, this is my first week. So, I think part of the audience that we're trying to target are obviously people who might use ngrok, duh. But, um, I personally gauge my writing based on a single metric, which is, and I say this with all the love in the world to JavaScript developers, but can a mid-level JavaScript developer understand what I'm saying? That's what I sort of, and I say this as somebody who also writes JavaScript. But I think that if I can speak to that's, you know, not the lowest common denominator, but like on the lower end, right? I try
Hmm.
not to assume a lot of, knowledge. Like maybe you know what an API is, you know what a database is, you know what a web server is. Cool. And then that's about it. And I try not to
Hmm.
assume much more because I think that even people who are far more experienced really benefit from things being broken down to a lower level. Often you end up making connections that you never did before. So, and I've found this even for myself when I've been researching topics that I'm like, oh, I know what that thing is, and then I research it and I'm like, oh, no, I didn't. Wow,
Uh,
and that's really fascinating. Um, so I don't know if I can like confidently say this is exactly how we find the students that we're looking for, but I do think that not assuming a ton of like I don't want to assume that people are coming in with all of this base knowledge aside
hmm.
from just like basic programming software skills. And even then, a lot of the stuff that the topics that we're looking into talking about and researching, if I'm being honest, like you don't actually need that much programming knowledge at all because a lot of it's actually math.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't even say it's like that complicated of math. It's not calculus. At least I haven't. Who knows? Listen, I'm getting through this book about compression. Maybe we'll get there. I don't know. We're gonna find out. But there is, I think, a lot of power in talking about things from the ground up, because there's a lot of foundational information that people sort of assume that they know, and then they don't really, and then they wonder why they're struggling when they're learning these like higher level ideas. So that's how I approach educating.
Yeah. I think that even people with experience have gaps that they don't know. As you learn incidentally, which is what most people do once they get out of school, you just kind of learn on the job. You skip over things, not on purpose, but because you don't even know that that thing existed, or like you don't necessarily need it in your day to day. And so you don't go very deep on it. And so that's the sort of thing that an educator like yourself kind of helps to fill in, and helps them use the tools that they're using more effectively. Would you say that, like, if we're talking about jobs theory, which is this idea that every person has jobs that need to be done, and then they hire a product or a service to do that job for them. So what would you say are the jobs to be done by your potential students?
Like, what roles are they in?
Yeah, like, or what are the problems that they are experiencing that are solved by the videos that you produce?
Let me think about this. There's quite a range of work that our customers tackle. Some people are on the ground software engineers, some people are more DevOps, they're fiddling with Kubernetes, things like that. So they're kind of all over the place. DevOps, I think, is a pretty good umbrella, although DevOps is, I have learned my lesson in trying not to overgeneralize DevOps, because I have friends in that field who are like, it's a lifestyle, okay, it's a whole thing. But which I can't disagree. Listen, but I do think that as a term, I think it covers a lot of the topics that we want to tackle. I also know that, and again, 1 week in, so I can't say like for absolute certainty what topics we're going to be covering, but I would be, shocked if some of that also was not AI agent related, because
Sure.
it's 2026 and this is where software is going. And so I think it is incredibly important, more than ever, for developers, and especially early career developers, who maybe aren't getting the same fundamental education that like people like you and I grew up with.
Yeah.
What tools do they need? And I think this is a challenge for educators, as we're kind of figuring out, like, I don't know, what happens if you don't know these specific, like, fundamental foundational skills, right? Like, I I try not to be too much of a curmudgeon, but like, I'll give you a comparison. So I took a break from tech back in, I think, 2023, 2022 or something, to study interior design. And then I very quickly learned, I don't actually like having clients, and I don't actually want to do this full time. It's fine. I love design. But in the class, they taught us how to make architectural diagrams with pen and paper, with rulers. We did the lettering by hand with rulers. No one does that. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that that did not benefit me in any way. Any way, right? And there's a sort of a growing stage that anyone who has been in the industry for a long time has to cope with, when they realize, like, this skill that was like absolutely necessary is no longer necessary. And the reality is, I can't say with confidence which part of software engineering is still required for building good software, because I already have a lot of this knowledge. I can't just like put a blinder on part of my brain to be like, what happens when I don't know how CSS works? Is everything going to turn out okay?
Maybe it's fine. Who knows? Yeah.
And so like these newer people who are just coming up are like, they're kind of an experiment. Who knows, right? So it is really hard to give direction. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. Like, the answer is that it's kind of hard. a lot of people asked me, like, Kent, should I turn off my agent when I'm taking your courses so that like it doesn't just answer the questions for me? And
Hmm.
my answer to that is like, no way. Are you kidding? Because the way that I have always wanted to teach people is to simulate as closely as possible the scenario in which they will use the skill that I'm trying to
Hmm.
teach them. And so, like in a situation where you're building a React app, are you going to be using an agent? Yes, you're going to be using an agent. You should definitely be doing that even when you're practicing and doing my course. Like
Hmm.
the way that I think about it too is like when syntax highlighting in editors became a thing, do you think that it would make any sense for the seniors to tell the juniors, oh, as you're learning, you should turn that off? Because like we didn't have that when we were learning.
Kent, are you saying that writing code on a whiteboard is not a good representation of what it means to? What are you talking about, Kent?
Oh
What do you
man, we've
mean?
just upended the entire interviewing industry. Yeah, but I think I like your framing of this as kind of being an experiment on educators and or on the students who are entering the industry. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for you and myself also to reach out to these new students or just to our audience and try to understand how are you doing things now and where are the pain points because they're different from when we were learning and getting into the industry. So, Annie, you mentioned twice now that you've only been in this new role for a week, and so let's actually talk a little bit about your previous experience as well,
Mm-hmm.
being a developer advocate. So, in that role, you were there for quite a while. You probably got a pretty good sense for the customers that you had and the needs that they had. Can you talk to me about how you identified the users that you were serving with the content that you were producing over there?
Yeah, well, the whole idea of like targeting the sort of a mid-tier JavaScript developer was something that I came up with when I was working at my previous role at Fly.io, which was that was where I sort of got my career started as like a video person. And and it makes sense to target like that level of developer because it's not to say that that's like the majority of developers on Fly.io, but it is sort of the lowest common denominator of the customers. We get a lot of, I mean, Fly.io is, among many things, a platform as a service where you can deploy all sorts of things, right? Um, and I think that was ultimately the best starting point. But it also, I think, because I was talking at this level, but I was actually talking about things that even JavaScript developers like they don't even need to care about these things. Like there was a whole video of one of my personal favorite videos that I did was I broke down this quirky thing that they do with the CLI where they basically, and don't ask me to repeat it now because it's been like a couple years since I had to recite all of this, but they basically recreated the IP protocol in user space. That is a protocol that typically lives in kernel space. And like even the idea of like kernel space, user space, JavaScript, you don't need to know about any of that stuff, right? That is like, and so I introduced these concepts and build on them. And I think what worked the most was it was less about me deciding these are the fundamental things that you need to learn and more plugging into delight and curiosity because like the one thing that we all have in common is that we're a sucker for like a fiddly little engineering quirk, right? But you got to pull people in and make them curious. And my goal has always been to like trick people into learning things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so like there was even trying to come up with a title about that CLI trick that they did was really hard. And so I had to sort of lean on clickbaity tactics of like, we did something weird with our CLI and it's got a very YouTube looking kind of thumbnail. And, but that's just because like, when you actually start to get into the weeds, it is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And so one of the most fun things about those videos was getting people excited about things that they did not think they could be excited about. And I think that is the magic because I think, especially in the world of engineering that's run by AI agents, the thing that will differentiate you, and I can say this with confidence, even though we're in the experimental era of all this stuff, I can say with confidence that if you are not curious and actively asking questions while also using these agents, then you're as good of you're a button pusher, right?
Yeah.
You're not actually being an engineer, right? And so when you bring that curiosity to whatever problem you're trying to solve, that's how you learn the best. And then AI just happens to be a thing to like frequently either iterate on things or to get to get answers to questions, right? Obviously, you have to know how to fact check too. That's a really big thing. But I think that a lot of the videos that fly didn't necessarily come from a specific place of like, developers need to understand this thing, so I'm going to educate them, and more of like a, what can we get people excited about, right? Because I think when you plant that seed, more will grow from that, you know? And honestly, even though I'm in a like an official educator role now, that is absolutely the spirit that I'm bringing to my work moving forward. Because if you're not excited, if I'm not sparking curiosity, then I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, interesting. I want to ask you here in a second about like the ultimate goals and how you measure success for things. But before I do, I just wanted to call out that you want to trick people into learning things, and that's, I don't know if you're familiar with the YouTuber Mark Rober, but he tries to help people be an engineer, or like think like an engineer is his big thing. It's really, really good for teaching science to kids. He's basically like the new Bill Nye the Science Guy, but he actually was an engineer at NASA. And he uses the term hiding the vegetables. And so it's just like, here, we're going to do something that's going to capture your attention in like YouTube algorithm type ways, I guess. but in the process, you're going to learn some science facts, and that'll be really interesting. The other thing that I wanted to call out too was you mentioned ultimately being curious as being that's like uniquely human. It's still going to be valuable. And I've heard this repeated over episodes in this podcast where people say that they agree with you, just to validate what you've said. Don Norman, for example, he's the author of The Design of Everyday Things. Really great book. He's 90 years old, and he came on the podcast to talk about like his history. And he was a UX. He actually created or coined the term user experience while he was over at Apple. So just brilliant person. And I asked him, how do you know what ideas are good? And he says, you don't. The whole idea is just to be curious and constantly trying new things. I just thought that went really well with what you said. So what is the goal? If we're pivoting over to both Fly and ngrok, how do you measure success of the content that you produce?
Views and likes. Just views and likes. I'm just kidding. That's not nothing. I mean, that's not nothing. To me, engagement is a metric that I pay attention to a lot. That I also think that it's a metric that I can learn from a lot. Is if I'm starting to see similar questions in the comments, that's like a little thread that I can pull apart. How do I know if it's a success? I really wish I had a fancier answer other than like how much it's been shared. But I also want to know the context in which it's being shared, right? Are people, I want to curse on this play. Are people, what's a cleaner way of saying? Are people dissing it? Are people trash talking what I've made? And they're like, she doesn't know what she's talking about, or something like that. Or what? But sometimes also that happens even when you're telling something that's true. I definitely made a lot of container Kubernetes people angry when I did a video for Fly, when saying like, this is why we don't use containers. And they're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. How dare you say that a virtual machine is more secure than a container? And I'm like, yeah, okay. I don't know how to argue about this.
So you're looking for good engagement.
good engagement, and people, the comments that mean the most to me are the ones that are like, I just stumbled upon this video and I watched it all the way to the end. Like, I did not know I could be this like entranced and like so excited about this one topic, right? Those are extra fun to get. A lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, I've been wondering about this thing for ages and it finally clicked. Like, that is what I want to hear. That is what I want to hear. Because a lot of the things that I share about, I mean, fly.io was a slightly different experience, but even I have my own channel that I very sporadically post to, where I talk about all sorts of things. I've made videos about like, what is a neural network and what is a vector database and what are embeddings and blah, 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 right? And I've definitely gotten a lot of comments there where I'm just talking about something fundamental that I find fascinating. And again, these are topics that there's plenty of information out there, right? It coming from me, this is not new information, but it is being presented in a new way. And so hearing people share that this was the piece of content, this form of education is the thing that made it click, then I was like, okay, that's really good. Or sometimes it's the opposite, where they're like, they keep repeating the same comment, being confused about something that I said, right? Or maybe I oversimplified things. So, and I'm getting a lot of like, well, actually comments. that happens too. But I would say that is one of the most useful, like, having a lot of likes and views is good for like, cool, we picked a popular topic. But how well are people actually engaging it with it? Are they actually leaving comments? Are they actually sticking around for a long time? That's another really important metric. I know, like, just talking about, I don't know, it feels very uncool to be like, let's just look at all the numbers and stuff like that. But like,
numbers are there for a reason. And I was going to ask you, like, how that impacts your feedback loop. Like, did you or have you so far ever decided to make a new video or change the way that you're going to do a video because of the feedback and the engagement and the comments that you're getting?
The question is, like, from that feedback, have I altered how I've
framed videos?
Yeah.
Like, typically when you're building a product, you want to close a feedback loop so that the user feedback comes back in, and then you can think about it like, okay, maybe we're not going to do what they said because of these other constraints, but we can do this, and that should solve the same problem, that sort of thing. So in content creation, you have kind of a built-in mechanism for people to leave feedback through the comments. And I'm just curious if you've run into that, and like somebody left a comment that said, oh, I'd really like to dive deeper into this. And oh, great, yeah, let's do that.
The thing that has been the most informative to me in terms of feedback loop has actually been, there's a term for the analytic, basically the percentage of people, like, where are people dropping off? Seeing where people drop off is an incredibly important metric. I think a lot of new YouTubers, content creators, especially in video form, underestimate how important those first 30 on YouTube videos. It's the first 30 seconds. On shorts, it's the first 2 seconds. And I'm not joking. It's the first 2 seconds. Unfortunately, in these days, like, education, I think it sort of depends on the length of the content. If you're making an hour-long YouTube video and somebody has elected to click on that thing, right? And it's clearly like, here's an hour-long video on how to use Blender, right? Like, people are like, all right, I've got my drink, buckle up, let's learn some things, right? That's a situation where you can afford to have a slightly longer intro because people are like, have mentally prepared for this. But if it's just like a random video next to a Theo video that you're just like, oh, I wonder what that's about, it needs to be fast, under 30 seconds. And I have found an enormous improvement in my videos since paying more attention to that early part of the engagement. And, I could blame it on like internet culture and our like everyone now feels like it has ADHD, even though they don't. But like, we are taught through social media to require constant, dopamine hits all the time. And there's definitely problems in that, but it is something you have to sort of learn to adapt with by just getting to the point much quicker, getting to the point and telling people why they should care. Right. And that is a real challenge. I think that is one of the most important things that people tend to underestimate when they're making this kind of educational content, because people don't have to watch what you're making. They don't have to. They can watch a million other things. So you need to tell them why it's valuable immediately.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and tracks. I actually, I just an hour before we started recording, I published the first video on YouTube that I ever spent a considerable amount of time on, like, producing. Normally, my YouTube channel for over a decade has been, I just hit record and then I uploaded it. I didn't edit or anything and I never thought about the thumbnail, any of that. But this is the first time I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna put a lot of effort into it, and I'm actually getting serious about YouTube, and going to be doing this a lot more in the future. And yeah, trying to figure out that that YouTube game, the algorithm, and all of that has been frankly irritating to have to deal with, like, the attention issues that people have, and everything, myself included. I have swiped past a video after 2 seconds, right? So it is an interesting constraint on online education, like free online education.
But I do think that there's some power in understanding the importance of getting their attention very quickly, but then knowing how to, like, keep it. Because what I find is that once you've earned their attention after the first minute or so, definitely after the first 30 seconds, again, this is specific to YouTube. Once you're in there, you've got them hooked, and then you can slow down a little bit. You don't. Not everything has to be like TikTok level fast. In fact, even in the world of TikTok, which I have a TikTok account where I just talk about comic books. It's nothing to do with work, but I have noticed that if you can get people's attention quickly, people will stick around on a TikTok video for 10 whole minutes, which is, that's eons in the TikTok world, right? If you can
I didn't
get
realize
people to
you
stick
could
around.
post videos that long.
Oh, absolutely. And people, actually, those are some of my favorite videos, especially if it's like story time. They're like, okay, so my boss said that. Anyways, but it's like, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if you can hook people early on, they'll get sucked in, right? And so you are able to speak a little bit slower, introduce things a little bit slower, so long as you're not rambling. I do think that so much of content creation is understanding pacing. I mean, I'm a storyteller, and I don't say that in like a vague kind of way. Like, I literally write fiction. I make comic books. I am an actual storyteller, and that translates very well to my work as a content creator. I don't even like the word content creator. I don't know why. I just don't. It feels too marketing-y. But I think when you, especially as an educator, when you stop thinking of it as, I just need to convey all of this information that needs to get into your brain, and you start thinking of it more in terms of something that needs to be paced, that and a little bit more like a story, as cheesy as that sounds, all of a sudden that completely changes your delivery, and it completely changes how much people are able to absorb. So pacing, I think, is a really important thing. But
Love that. Well, Annie, I also, to kind of shift gears a little bit, I wonder, to tie this back to the business outcomes and things, in your time, whether it be at Fly or the brief time you've been at ngrok, is there like some business metric that you're trying to increase with the content that you're creating? Or is it mostly just we just want to have more eyeballs on this, like on our YouTube channel, so that they see they associate our brand with, good technical expertise or whatever. Like, what is there a specific business metric that you watch to make sure that things are going the direction that you want them to in this content creation?
So this is one of the hardest parts about what I do. This is why I was very eager to jump on this particular role, because not many companies are willing to invest in just like an educator, not even a developer advocate. I'm not a developer advocate anymore. I'm a developer educator. It's in my title. And not many companies are willing to invest in that. But if you think of the example that was given to me when ngrok was telling me about this role, is if you look at, I think it's DigitalOcean, probably some other providers, but they have a lot of articles about like the fundamentals of the internet, right? I'm pretty sure they have articles about like, what's a domain registrar? How is that different from a domain host and DNS records and blah, 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 right? And they've established themselves as authorities in their field, right? And I think that does a lot. And I think a lot of other companies like Trello and probably Asana and all these others, they have full-on productivity blogs where they talk about things that may not even relate to their product at all, right? Obviously, they do have things that are related to what they're selling, but it's not all of it, right? And I think that when companies are able to establish themselves as authoritative figures in their world, that builds trust. So I guess in a roundabout way, I am still a developer advocate, because that's sort of like the core of what it means to be a developer advocate, is to build that trust. It's not even to build, it's to earn it, right? You have to earn it. And so that is the purpose of this huge education push. What's tricky is, what numbers are you supposed to point to, right? Obviously, you can look at like how popular the article or video was, and that's not nothing. That's not nothing. We do look at those things. But if I'm being honest, like there's not. I actually have like a coworker in marketing who I think would be more able to answer on like specific numbers that they look for. They, maybe through cookies, we can track to see like who signed up after reading Annie's blog post, right? We could maybe track that. But even then, if we're talking about developers, how many of us accept the cookies that are shoved in our faces? No, deny all, every single time, deny all. So I know it's a really unsatisfactory answer, but like, it's hard to measure. It's really hard to measure. But what we have seen is, we've seen, and I say we, at fly.io, they saw a lot of success just through what people are chattering about when they're talking about Fly. Often my videos came up. In fact, we even had like, I think we've even had like a couple of, I keep saying we, I feel so strange, like distancing myself from a company I was just at. I'm terrible at this. But I know that Fly had some applicants that were like, oh yeah, I learned about Fly through that lady on the videos. I saw her videos. It was great, right? And so it absolutely helps with brand awareness. Another term I don't love, but it helps. It really helps. And I think, unfortunately, and I think this is why so many companies are really hesitant to approach marketing in this way. Right? Because at the end of the day, it is marketing. I am doing marketing.
Yeah.
But it's a really subtle, it's a different approach. And because there's not as many like concrete, clear numbers that we could be like, we had this many blog posts and now we get this many more signups. Like it's a lot, kind of like billboard ads. Like, how do you?
Yeah.
Well, then again, I'm not defending billboard ads because I have no idea if those are actually
or like conference sponsorships struggle with the same sort of thing.
Yeah, but even conference sponsorships, that's, you can track that with discount codes, right? That kind of thing. But it's still, there are other effects that you're not able to measure. And so as long as these posts are gaining a lot of viewership, I think that's a really good metric. And it does take a bit of faith. If I'm not being totally honest, it's a little bit of a faith thing. You have to just kind of believe that what you're doing is an important thing for the community. And I do. I really think it's important more than ever. Because I think, again, to get back to that curiosity thing, what worries me and the existential crisis that I am certain that I know my peers have been experiencing is, what does it actually mean to be a software engineer anymore? And if there's one way I can help with that, it is through instilling curiosity, right? And not just letting our eyes glaze over at just like, Claude, what do I do about this? All right, yeah, do that. Okay, like, be curious, ask questions, right? Also, Claude as good as Opus is these days, it still makes things up sometimes, okay? It just like pulls things out of thin air, right? That doesn't really change, and surprise, bigger context window doesn't actually solve everything. But there's still such a need for that curiosity. So it's not only that I think that this is, and I know I'm Ramble City over here, but it's not only that I think curiosity is one of the most, if not the most, important skill you can have as an engineer. That was true before, but it is especially true now. The other thing is that as much as I have found benefit in tools like Claude Code, there has been a trade-off in terms, like, building software physically feels different to me. And like the kind of flow state that I would get into when I was like deep in the code, doing it the old-fashioned ways, with my fingies and stuff, it was a very different experience. And with Claude, well, it is sort of addictive when you're like able to like iterate on product decisions, right? Like, I run this webcomic platform that's sort of like my baby that I work on outside of work. And that's where I spend most of my engineering energy. It's very, very exciting to be able to iterate quickly on the product side of things. But in terms of like engineering problem solving, AI has kind of made it boring, if I'm being honest. And that makes me a little bit sad. And so that's sort of been a crisis that I've been having to deal with is this excitement, this joy that I've had of being an engineer. Where do I put that now? Right? Where do I put that? And because it doesn't perfectly translate to doing product things. I think that I don't like the idea that like you don't need to know any technical knowledge, right? Anymore. That's like complete nonsense. And so much of my educational work has been an opportunity for me to find a new place to like put this really geeky energy, right? And be like, well, how does that work? Like that kind of energy is what I want to instill in other people. And it is a place I need to put my own energy, given that like it's not really necessary for building software anymore. It's not as necessary, right? Or the types of decisions that you're making are higher level. They're about the product. They're about the architecture, the infrastructure, right? Which, not to say that those are not technical, but it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah. I think that all of us have been promoted, I guess. Like I remember before AI, like 10 years ago, or even when I was just getting started, I just loved coding. It was so fun. And I remember talking to people who were decades my senior, and I'd say like, they've climbed the corporate ladder and stuff. And I'd say, how much time do you spend coding? Oh, none at all, basically. And I'd say, do you miss it? And some of them would say, yeah, I miss it sometimes, and others not. But my thought was always like, I would hate that so much. I do not want to climb the corporate ladder. I just want to be the IC all the time. But yeah, we've all been promoted. And
whether you like it or not.
I mean, for the fun of it, you can just write code by yourself. It's not like nobody's stopping you. But when it comes to being a marketable software engineer, you can't do that. You're not as productive as the person next to you. Now, whether you are being productive in the right direction is a different question. And that's part of what being a good product engineer is. But yeah, like you've got to kind of just embrace the fact that we've all been promoted to team leads who don't code as much, and instead we're thinking these higher level architectural systems type of thinking.
I will say that as somebody who I am a very multifaceted engineer, I've actually worked as a designer as well. I've done actual UX, not just for companies but for my own products, and UX has always been at the top of my gripe list of of all the companies that I've worked for. I've always run into UX issues here or there that, as somebody who has not only worked in tech for most of her career, I've worked in like tech, right? Like the tech for the tech people, that has been like most of my career. Very little of my programming experience was for just like, we're building a website for your local dentist, right? Which makes me sound like I'm like condescending that. I'm just saying that like I've been in the weeds for a very, very long time. And engineers over engineering things. They love to over engineer things. And they often don't think about the user experience as much. And I think this is especially true for developers who build things for developers. And I think that now that there is more of a need than ever to focus on UX, I'm going to take that back. It's not that there's more of a need. It's that there's less of an excuse not to focus on that. There's way less of an excuse, right? But it is showing sort of gaps in people's skills that like, and so there's a little part of me that feels extremely vindicated that I'm like, yeah, now you have to pay attention to this. You have no excuse. Which has been really satisfying. Again, with like my side projects, even though the coding experience is very different, the speed at which I can iterate on a platform, on a product, and just test every little thing out to be like, I don't like that. No, try it this way. Like half of my design work it's not in Figma. It's directly in the browser because I can just go boom, 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 and it's incredible. And that part really does feel amazing. And so I feel incredibly excited that you can't ignore UX as much anymore. Like that, if you want to differentiate yourself, that's how you do it. And I'm saying UX, but I would actually extend that to like product design in general, or just product development, right? Deciding what the features are, how they should be laid out. What is that experience going to look like? That is the thing that is going to differentiate more than just like the tech stack underneath.
Yeah, because everything else is derivative, right? Like if you just let the AI make all the product decisions and everybody does that, then they're all going to be the same. So like finding a way to let your humanity come out in the way that the product is designed is crucial. Annie, this has been a wonderful conversation. We've reached the end of our time together. Is there a piece of homework that you'd like to leave with people, something that they can actively actually do, like a book to read or an activity to try that you think could help people become better product engineers?
Two. So there is a book I would like to recommend, which fair warning, it does have a curse word in it, but it is one of the best user experience books out there, and it's called Badass: Making Users Awesome. I cannot recommend this enough. It is about user experience in everything, more than just like, this is beyond software. This is in everything. And they talk about how the best way to get people to adopt your product is to make it like the number one marketing tactic is recommendations. If people will recommend your thing, that is the best thing. But how do you get people to do that? Well, you make it feel like they can do amazing things. It's not about, look at this camera, look at all these little features that we've got, all these like little widgets and stuff. No. What can I become as the user? How cool can I become thanks to this? That is how you do that. And it breaks down so much about user experience, and a lot of it has to do with education. And how do you actually teach something that's really complex, like how to use a DSLR or something, right? What are those steps? How do you actually, It is so much more in depth than you could possibly imagine. Cannot recommend it enough.
And it's not that long of a book. So
no, it's
yeah.
it's very short. And it's very digestible too, right? It's got lots of diagrams and stuff like that. It's very digestible. The second thing I would say is to improve your product muscles. I've got a dog here floating in front of me. Take a product that you might have been a customer of, but you're not because you've opted for something else. And then go through the flow again and write down every little thing that gets you stuck, right? And I mean everything. Because I think what often happens is when we are not trained to look really critically at what specific things could be improved, we walk away from a bad user experience just being like, it's just awkward. And that's not helpful information. And so if you, to start to develop an eye for it's not even an eye, but to be able to really, an intuition for like what things are wrong, you have to get into the weeds. And I mean, really into the weeds, right? When you're going through the flow, is it confusing how the input fields are laid out? Is it confusing the way their select menu is like a custom select menu and you can't, it could be an accessibility thing. All sorts of things. Write down every little clunky thing. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to write this stuff down. And you'll start to realize like, oh, there's like 1,000 things I have opinions about, right? Is it like, this error message is too small, I didn't notice it. Oh, there's a notification up here. I realized I was supposed to click on that, but it wasn't clear. It wasn't obvious. This looks like duplicate information. Whatever it is, anything, you have to have this internal sense of like, when are my eyes glazing over? Right? I now have a very good radar for like when my eyes start to, what? That is something you need to pay attention to because anytime it's your little user experience spidey senses. And I would say this also translates to education because I think not to brag, but I think one of the things that makes my educational approach so successful is that I'm very good at picking out like the dumb questions that people would be too embarrassed to ask. If there's any little inkling of like, I don't know, that one part feels a little fuzzy. I don't feel like I really understand that part. Boom, I latch onto that. So that everything is just perfectly ironed out and I have a much better understanding of the space. But it's the same kind of like intuition for when things are confusing. What specifically is confusing? What doesn't feel right? Because that is surprisingly hard to cultivate, but it is, I think, one of the most important skills people can be developing as anyone who is building anything, but especially software engineers.
I love that. Thank you for those 2 bits of homework, Annie. What's the best way for people to keep up with you and ask any follow-up questions they might have or anything?
My big thing is Blue Sky. So if you want to follow me, I am at anniesexton.com on Blue Sky.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining. Don't forget to do the like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Annie will be looking at the comments, I'm sure, as will I. So yeah, thank you again for joining us and we'll see you all in the next one. See ya.
All right.